I am at the historic Strauss Mansion in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. Why am I here? Well, in 1980, a slasher-style horror movie was released, and this was really the main location in the movie. It was the killer's house, and this was where he brought people back to kill him. It's kind of like a rip-off of the movie Psycho. It was that format. The 1980 horror movie was called Don't Go in the House, and the star of the movie should be no stranger to Sopranos fans. It was the actor Dan Grimaldi, aka Patsy Parisi, from The Sopranos. Dan Grimaldi was the star of the movie. He played the killer in Don't Go in the House. This is not the most popular movie. I haven't really heard of it before doing the research for this video. What can you expect if you go watch this movie? Well, I'll let Patsy describe it for you.
It won't be cinematic.
Welcome to Sopranos Random Thoughts for Season 4. Enough of you have enjoyed my Random Thoughts for Seasons 1, 2, and 3 videos, so I figure, hey, let's make another. Really happy to see that people have been appreciating the series. If enough people like, comment, share this. If I see that people are enjoying this, I will continue to make more, because I'm having fun making these. So it's fun to go on these locations and all that. Anyway, enough me blabbing. Let's get into it. Since this is the Random Thoughts video, as always, we should start with the random section. Speaking of the actor Dan Grimaldi, a random fact about him that I didn't know until I was doing the research for this video was that he actually has a bachelor's degree in mathematics, a master's degree in operations research, whatever that is, and a PhD in data processing. He also has been and continues to be a college professor at Kingsborough Community College in Brooklyn. You can easily find things like his Rate My Professor page if you just Google for a minute. His reviews seem to be solidly mixed. People love or hate his class. There doesn't seem to be much of an in-between, but you can say that about any teacher, I guess. Speaking of Sopranos actors' real-life factoids, the actress who played Agent Sanseverino, her name is Karen Young. In real life, she was once married to Tom Noonan, and if you're familiar with my channel, you know I've been getting into the Hannibal Lecter series a lot recently, and Tom Noonan actually played Francis Dollaride, aka the Red Dragon, in the original Hannibal movie called Manhunter. Everyone's favorite episode from the first season of The Sopranos is, without a doubt, A Hit is a Hit, featuring the greatest rock band of all time, Visiting Day. Why do I mention this? Well, in the fourth season, second episode, there are a couple little details that remind me of the Hit is a Hit episode. For example, when Tony and Carmela are talking here, she mentions Denmark.
Some friend of Misty's is making a movie in Denmark.
And I swear this is the only other time that Denmark is ever mentioned in the show. Because if you remember in the Hit is a Hit, he goes, I've recorded in Denmark.
But I've recorded in Denmark.
In the same episode, Adriana mentions that previously, before she met Christopher, she had an abortion, and that pregnancy was from, quote, some guy she used to date.
A long time ago, before Christopher even, I had an abortion. I mean, I know it's wrong, but the guy was such an asshole.
And again, I think the only other time we hear about one of her exes is that guy from Visiting Day. And this scene takes place in her rock music club, so coincidence? I don't know. Maybe. This scene here where Meadow is trying to convince her parents why she should go on her little trip to Europe, she mentions that her friend is not making a student film, but rather a, quote, feature on DV Cam, and that he hangs out with Dogma.
It's not a student film. It's a feature on DV Cam. Alvar hangs out with Dogma.
Meadow is actually referring to something called Dogma 95, which is a Danish avant-garde film-making movement, you could say, started by Lars von Trier and Thomas Vinterberg. Dogma 95 is this whole other rabbit hole if you want to go and learn about it. It's got its own rules, which they call the, quote, vows of chastity, which are these guidelines that if you want to make a film in their style, you have to follow those. Honestly, I feel like when I see a line like that coming from Meadow, to me, it just feels like the show's writers showing off their hip film knowledge. When I heard this random line from Hesh,
horses like company. Seabiscuit had his own horse that he traveled with.
I had to look this up, and it turns out that Seabiscuit did actually have a fellow horse that he traveled around with named Pumpkin. It was said that Pumpkin was a calming influence and a lifelong companion to Seabiscuit. Well, that's nice. Pumpkin was also featured in the Seabiscuit movie, and there was even a song named Pumpkin on the Seabiscuit soundtrack. The more you know. Speaking of the horse racing episode, I think this moment here when Pyomai wins and the guys are celebrating, this is probably the happiest we ever see this crew in the entire series. Why is the Wells Fargo logo on this van in this scene here blue? Have they ever had a blue logo? I've never seen them having a blue logo. I googled around for a couple minutes, couldn't find a blue version of their logo. What's going on here? The way Chrissy says, come here.
Come here. Come here.
I don't know how this hasn't been turned into a meme yet in the Sopranos community. That's probably one of the worst line pronunciation deliveries in the entire show. Christopher also has another wonderful line delivery moment later in the season.
I didn't.
If you're watching this and are around my age, you probably get hit with a wave of nostalgia when you see the computer that AJ is using. Popular everyday technology used to have all these different and unique wild designs to them. Seems like everything nowadays is just some variation of a black rectangle. This little throwaway line where AJ asks Carmela if she's still using the internet and then he gets frustrated and walks away is also a relic from another time.
You still online?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am.
At that time, not all houses had internet, and those who did, it wasn't always fast and useful as it is today, so not everyone in your family could be online at the same time. Speaking of technology in The Sopranos, the little subplot of Janice messing with Bobby's kids via AOL Instant Messenger chat has to be one of the most despicable things she's done in the entire series. This feels like something Eric Cartman would do from a South Park episode. By the way, their screen names are pretty funny. Bobby Jr.'s is Power Bob 386. I love Power Bob. And Janice's is Vlad 666. No idea where she got that from. Probably just trying to be creepy. Also, speaking of Bobby Jr., the actor who played him, you may remember he was also in that classic comedy movie School of Rock. Well, it turns out recently, and I mean like January of this year, 2025 recently, he got married to one of his co-stars from School of Rock, Caitlin Hale. You know, good for him. It's good to see that he's emotionally recovered since Bobby's untimely demise. I like these two exceptionally random one-off side characters in this episode. There's this guy who comes by out of nowhere and just says, "Crack is some bad shit."
I told you young people that crack is some bad shit.
Then there's also this little kid that comes out and asks Elman, "Is this going to become a nice house?" or something like that.
Is it gonna be a nice house here now?
Obviously, I know what they're going for in the scene. They're trying to show the real-world consequences of the scam that Tony and the guys are running here, but this just seems so on the nose, especially for a show like this. Also, speaking of random side characters, hey look, it's Paul Dano. In this little scene here, we get a rare interaction just between Christopher and Silvio.
It's a big responsibility, Chrissy. Hey, I got it covered. First thing I'm doing is getting wings in my hair. You know, like Paulie. I'll talk to you later.
Seems like a good opportunity to, chat as friends and reciprocate the joke he told, but Sil is a man of few words. This giant inflatable rat is known as Scabby and is a symbol of organized labor in the U.S., originating in the 1980s with 2 Chicago unions claiming credit for the idea. Scabby has even appeared in movies and TV shows, including this episode of The Sopranos, thanks to connections with the Theatrical Teamsters Union, something noted by union organizer Anthony Esemplare, I guess is how you say it, whose mother, Frances Esemplare, played Polly Walnuts' mom on the show. I also remember seeing a signed picture of her in the same store where I bought my mattress. So I guess I have good taste in mattresses. I don't know what that means. For the next section, I want to talk about various aspects of the filming and editing in Season 4. I've mentioned this before in one of my strangest edits in the Sopranos videos, but this Italianissimo and Wild Bird Center sign is worth mentioning again. I'll forget about it, and then every time I watch this episode, the scene comes up, and I'm more perplexed each time I see this. The first episode of Season 4 may be the only time that the show doesn't end with fading or cutting to a black screen that the credits then play over. Instead, the first episode of Season 4 does a close-up zoom to the dollar bill that Christopher put on the fridge, and that Public Image limited song starts playing. I don't know if this counts as a strange edit or not. It's just a odd edit, I guess you could say. But in this scene here where Artie is changing his shirt in front of Tony, we never really see him put on the black sweater. It's just one shot, he has this one shirt on, and then boom, all of a sudden he's got this black sweater on.
I am a great magician. Your clothes are black.
Also, Artie's storyline in that episode is just so comical and pathetic. I like how he has his own "you talking to me" moment like in the Taxi Driver movie.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
Oh, Jean-Philippe. I called you 5 times. Qu'est-ce que c'est? Message machine broken.
When Ralph is running here, I think this is one of the only times in the show we see this type of camera movement. Kind of reminds me of Sam Raimi's crazy shots from the Evil Dead series. Not exactly the same, but, it's kind of get that frantic chasing feeling like they did in Evil Dead. This random thought isn't anything any fan of the show doesn't already know, but, every time I rewatch it, this intervention scene for Christopher here is one of the funniest moments in the entire show. If you ever need evidence that The Sopranos is just really a comedy series, just watch this again.
When I came in to open up one morning, there you were with your head half in the toilet. Your hair was in the toilet water. Disgusting.
I told you I had the flu.
I said my piece, Chrissy.
Throughout Season 4, Paulie has some interesting little subplots, and while I do think his little adventures with his mom and the other old ladies from the retirement home is funny, it just seems so inconsequential, like it doesn't have anything to do with anything, just kind of seems like filler It's like they didn't really know what to do with him this season. The episode called Christopher from season 4 about Christopher Columbus is probably my least favorite episode. It's not often that I'm ever bored watching the show, but when this episode comes on, it just feels like a drag. There's no real plot advancements that go on, just feels like filler. This Christopher episode would not seem so out of place if it happened somewhere like in the middle of the first season. It's a real small stakes, one-off kind of episode with themes about Italian-American identity that they touched on a lot more in the first season, and also features some more classic shots of the gang hanging out outside the pork store like they've done in the first season. Last item for the filming and editing section, look at that goat. I always like that shot. For the next section, I want to talk about Ralph Cifaretto. One of the most unintentionally consequential things that Ralph did was in season 4, and it was telling that joke about Ginny Sack's butt. One interesting thing I noticed is that the actual weight and size of the mole goes down slightly each time it's mentioned. Someone starts with saying 98 pounds.
I'll tell you what a gold mine is, those Harry Potter books.
That's because it gives the other kids, the 98-pound weaklings, some hope.
Then Ralph says the mole was 95 pounds.
Speaking of 98 pounds, I hear Ginny Sack's getting a 95-pound mole taken off her ass.
Then later it's referred to as a 90-pound mole.
Something about her having a 90-pound mole on her ass.
I don't know if the fictitious mole's shrinking weight lessens the offensiveness of it, but a 90-pound mole is still pretty big. So yeah, I guess it is offensive. Yeah. In the third episode of season 4, if you didn't know, why Ralph gets out of the car and goes, Stella! That is a reference to the 1951 classic film A Streetcar Named Desire, where Marlon Brando shouts that line.
Hey, Stella!
I do like this little bit of foreshadowing here when Johnny Sack tells Ralph that he should have let Tony chop off his head.
I should have let Tony chop your head off a year ago.
If you're a fan of the show, you probably have heard of the theory that Ralph Cifaretto is supposed to be the devil. Here are just some pieces of evidence skimming through season 4 that I found to support that. Many of the shots Ralph is in, there's often some red element somewhere. When he's on the couch with Janice, he's getting really excited watching death and destruction on TV, which is just, an odd way to spend time with your new girlfriend. After Janice pushes him down the stairs and goes into this room, there's a poster that says Out of Eden. There's more than one shot where we see a New Jersey Devil sticker behind Ralph. There's this shot where Ralph runs off screen and the camera pans to show a picture of Jesus. There's this scene where Ralph mentions the snack devil dogs.
Who's he thinks keeping that fat bitch in devil dogs anyway?
There's this scene with Janice and Ralph where she is reading a book called The Origins of Satan. And finally, while Ralph is grieving to the priest here, the priest quotes lyrics from the Rolling Stones song Sympathy for the Devil.
Were you there when Jesus Christ had his moment of doubt and pain?
Think of what's going on in this scene. We're supposed to be pitying Ralph for what happened to his son, so it's like we're supposed to be having sympathy for the devil. Get it? One small detail that I've never noticed before putting this video together is that the chains Tony and Christopher used to tie Ralph up and secure him in that bowling ball bag after they dismember him, I think those are like kinky sex-related chains that Ralph has no doubt used for his adventures. For the next section, let's talk about Carmela. So, throughout season 4, one of the main storylines going on is the deterioration of her relationship with Tony. This is the only season where the opening shot for the first and last episodes is of Carmela. Just comparing the first episode's opening shot to the last episode's opening shot, you can really see how much Carmela has been through emotionally speaking throughout the season. There's this little throwaway line where Carmela briefly mentions the Soprano Christmas in the Bahamas.
Our passport from our Christmas in the Bahamas is still valid.
I wish we got to see that. Wouldn't that be a fun little filler kind of episode? I'll take that any day over the Christopher episode. This scene where Tony and Carmela visit Meadow and her friends at the apartment in the city. Why is Carmela rearranging things on the table and fixing the napkins? It's subtle, but if you look in the background, she's doing that. This scene takes place right after Carmela learned that Furio fled the country and went back to Italy, so maybe she's just being exceptionally neurotic, or maybe she's just being an annoying mom readjusting things in her daughter's place, like the table setting wasn't good enough for her or something. Maybe a bit of both. Hey. Hi, Doug. For the next section, let's talk about the star of the show, the man himself, Tony Soprano. So, first random thought is, I like how obvious it is that Tony has no idea what he's talking about in this scene, where he's relaying to Carmela the information about the financial divorce advice he got earlier at the horse betting track.
Yeah, well, there's better ones. In vitro something.
What? What's wrong with this one?
It's irrevocable, and we don't want to get locked in.
To what?
And then he just pivots and starts saying, quoting Muhammad Ali, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. It's like, what in the world are you talking about here?
Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Excuse me?
It's the government, calm. You gotta be flexible.
It's subtle, but I love how hard Tony is trying not to laugh when Johnny Sack tells him about the joke about Ginny's weight. You can rewatch this over and over and just see James Gandolfini's face trying not to crack up.
Well, that's deplorable.
First time I watched the episode called Watching Too Much Television, I didn't get all the subtlety and all the layers going on, but now every time I rewatch it, I think it's one of my favorite episodes of season 4, and the ending is just hilarious to me. This is Tony at his most comically pathetic. This soulful, romantic song comes on, and it makes him miss his former Guma so much that this big, tough mafia guy who told Furio to get over it after his dad died starts crying like a high schooler who just got dumped for the first time. Then he goes to Zellman's house and beats the crap out of him.
Go ahead, cry like a bitch.
The scene is hilarious. There's this little trick that the show does a number of times where someone smarter than Tony will give him some bit of wisdom or insight, and then later Tony repeats that to someone else as if it was his own idea. The second episode of season 4 is a good example of this. While it's not Tony doing the relaying of information, it's actually Christopher.
Christopher, think. The big fucking picture, huh?
And then later, we see him telling Aide to focus on the big picture in the exact same way.
With all your intelligence, you never see the big picture.
As if this has been like, on his mind after he's been lectured to. And he's like, yeah, I should focus on the big picture. Why isn't she focusing on the big picture? Come on, be smart like me. These guys are so stupid. The very first episode of season 4 contains that hilarious scene at the diner with the fan favorite line. Quasimodo predicted all of this.
Quasimodo predicted all this.
Nostradamus. Quasimodo's the hunchback of Notre Dame.
All right.
Interestingly, the song that plays at the beginning and end of the first episode of season 4 is called World Destruction by the group Public Image Limited, and it contains the lyric, Nostradamus predicts the coming of the Antichrist. Maybe this is a big coincidence, I don't know, but it seems odd to me that the only time Nostradamus is mentioned in the show, we get more than one reference to him. This may be a bit of a stretch, but I think that lyric from that song could also be another tiny bit of evidence towards the Ralph is the devil theory. Think about it. Nostradamus predicts the coming of the Antichrist. Ralph is the Antichrist. He has a big plot line in the season. Who knows? Maybe. Maybe not. I don't know. Either way, if you stuck around to this point in the video, thank you very much. I appreciate it as always. And like I said, if enough people seem to be enjoying my Random Thoughts series, I will go on to season 5 and season 6. So, hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.